1 through 23. And we have two different birth narratives within the Bible of Jesus' birth. One being this one in Matthew, the other one being in Luke. They are somewhat different in what they represent as having happened, but they are the only two accounts that we have. Listen for this one as it speaks to us of a world in which is envisioned that people come together from all different places, and also some of the tragedies that happen when people come together. Listen to these words now from the Gospel of Matthew. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men came from the east, came to Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we have observed his star at its rising, and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him, and calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet, 'And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel.'" Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child. And when you have found him, bring me word so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that had been seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. And when they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. Then, opening their treasure, on entering the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered the gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. Now, after they had left, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, and said, "Get up and take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him." Then Joseph got up, took the child and his mother by night, went to Egypt, and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I have called my son." When Herod saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, he was infuriated, and he sent and killed all the children in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old or under, according to the time that he had learned from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what had been spoken through the prophet Jeremiah. A voice was heard in Ramah, wailing and loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be consoled because they are no more. When Herod died, an angel of the Lord suddenly appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who were seeking the child's life are now dead." Then Joseph got up, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was ruling over Judea in the place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And after being warned in a dream, he went away into the district of Galilee. And there he made his home in a town called Nazareth, so that what had been spoken through the prophets might be fulfilled. He will be called a Nazarene. May God add God's blessing to our understanding of the words for us today. If you were to ask a question about the scripture just read, if you could ask God a question about that story that was just told, what would be your question? Feel free if you have one on your mind to speak. How could a king be so mean to kill his children? questions. That one, I remember the first time that I heard that story, and the first time that I read it through myself, I thought, ooh, that is awful. It's just horrendous. As I got a little older and I started questioning some of the things that I had read in the Bible, I remember one of the things that I did when I was in high school is I decided that I was going to read the Bible all the way through. My grandfather was a pastor himself. I had two uncles who were also ministers, one on my mother's side, one on my father's side, so I got both parents. And I had heard these stories before, and I was always one of those inquisitive children that always had to ask all the questions that the adults never wanted to answer. I was that one. And I had these questions, I thought, it just doesn't seem right. And, I'd been told all these things about who God was and such, and I thought, I can see where people can be really mean. It seems impossible that somebody could be that mean, that envious, that much sense of jealousy about a little child, that he had killed a whole group of children. But I also thought to myself, how could God allow such a thing to happen? When I went to college, I knew that I was going to be a pastor. And I started taking religion and philosophy courses. And I had a professor at my undergraduate school by the name of Adolf Hansen. He ended up teaching in a seminary just after I graduated from the University of Indianapolis. And he was my biblical teacher in undergraduate school. And I remember having all these questions, and he distilled some truth that I hadn't thought about before. And one of the things that he distilled as truth was that the ancient Israelites did not share our worldview. That seems commonsensical, doesn't it? We who live in the 21st century, they would be amazed at the things that we know and the things that we experience, and even the gadgets that we have that we get for Christmas. They would be amazed. But often, when we read the biblical text, we carry our own assumptions into those stories. We read them from our perspective rather than this perspective of those who lived long ago. And I thought, well, how can we possibly know the perspective of somebody long ago? He said, that's why you study the Bible. You just don't read the Bible, you study it. You learn and try to read these commentaries that he told me about that I'd never heard about before. You read these books, that try to explain what the Bible was trying to say to the people of that day. He noted, too, that because their worldview was so different that what seems kind of strange and odd to us, that a star could be followed and then it would stop right over a house, doesn't make sense to us because we know that stars are light years away and they don't stop over houses. If they did, they would incinerate them immediately. But that worldview was common to them, for they thought that the stars were not that far away. And so it made sense to speak of the star as moving across the sky and even stopping right over a house. They were a lot more superstitious about cultural things as well as historical and natural events than we. Last week we had a quite stupendous event that happened cosmically speaking, at least from the Earth's perspective, and that the moon was shadowed, eclipsed by the Earth. Now, we in Wisconsin didn't get to see that because it was snowy and cloudy. But the rest of the world got to see that eclipse. Now, in ancient times, they would have thought of that as some sign, some omen that something big was happening. We simply can predict this and say, in another 4 years, we're going to have another one. So our perspective, our worldview is different. The second bit of distillation of wisdom that my professor Adolf Hansen said is, don't judge the Bible based on our assumptions, learn their assumptions, and then see if there's any truth that transfers transculturally and also cross-temporally. When I was taking these courses, he was telling us things that seemed just bizarre to me because I'd never heard some of the theories about why things happen and then the way that the thinking of the people were that day. I remember him once in an Old Testament class saying that the story of the Red Sea didn't happen exactly the way we imagine it happened. And I was just kind of blown away by that. And so were my classmates. In fact, I read a lot of the people in those classes, they ended up deciding to reject religion and Christianity completely because they said, this just isn't true. Well, I stayed in and kept on trying to learn more. Okay, if this is so different from what I was brought up believing, what can I learn from this? And one of the things that I learned is that I shouldn't get hung up on literal interpretations. That sometimes the truth of the story is more important than the facts of the story. In our day, if I ask you to create a story, if I ask you to tell a story of love, and that's kind of my sermon topic today, is for us to tell stories of love being born into this world. We might tell the story of Jesus, as we remember, but if I ask you to be a little more creative and tell a story of love in your life or in somebody in your family's life, what would that story be? Now, you might have a question for me. You might say, well, do you want the story to be fictional or non-fiction? Do you want it to be fact or fable? Do you want it to be myth or truth? We associate truth with facts. And this is one of the assumptions that the ancients did not share with us. Because truth got to a spiritual reality way beneath the facts. We have stories too. We do call them fables. Aesop had a whole book of them. Some of you probably have read those when you were children. You may have read them to your children and grandchildren. But we make a big distinction between what is fable or myth and that which is fact or historically true. In that day, they did not care so much about those distinctions. In fact, they would probably look at our penchant for trying to find the facts of the story as rather odd. Why would you take away the power and the inspiration of the story by focusing on the facts? I remember hearing a Jewish author one time say, the difference between Christians and Jews is really, we come from the same tradition, we believe in the same God, pretty much is all the same except for how we deal with the Scriptures. If you tell a Christian that something in the Bible is not true, they're going to get angry with you and they're going to debate you about the point and try to prove that they're right and you're wrong. If you tell that to a Jew, they say, of course. Makes a good story, doesn't it? How our assumptions of the 21st century, the things that we count as so important, they did not count so important. A good story was one that was filled with meaning and gave you a sense of purpose in life. Whether it had to do with the facts or not, that's another matter. So, what can we say about that? Is that the way that we enjoy stories today? About a month and a half ago, I actually shared in your worship service because you had somebody come to speak by the name of John Shelby Small. And I wanted to make sure that I heard him. I had never heard him preach before. And he told that story, if you remember, of Hosea and Gomer. And he told it in such a way that, and I've read that story several times, but he told it in such a way that I thought, I don't remember all that stuff. But he sure tells a nice version of it. I love what he said. In fact, I've never heard the story told with more meaning then I heard it on that Sunday here in Trinity, UCC. Later that day, I thought, I can't have missed all of that. So I went back to the story of Jose and Gomer and found that about 90% of what he said was embellished. Now that's not to criticize, that's to praise. Because he was able to find truth in a story and to create from it truths that made a difference in my life and hopefully yours in this day and age. It's not such a bad thing to create stories or embellish stories in such a way that it inspires us to live life more meaningfully and more purposefully. So I commend him on that. But if the details don't matter so much as the truth that lies behind them, what would be your story then of love? Born in the world. Now you don't have to think of a historically true story. You can make up one. What would be your story of love? What would you want to tell to your children or grandchildren? Something that would be inspiring and want them to be more loving, more caring, more kind in their own life. What kind of story would that be? Have you ever known somebody who you just admired just incredibly much, that you just thought that they were it? Maybe it was your mother, or your father, or grandfather, grandmother, a relative, maybe it was a teacher, but you just thought they were it. I think that's the way the disciples of Jesus and his followers thought of him. He was it. He brought into this world a sense of love and compassion and mercy that we've never encountered before. Yeah, we know that, the prophets said you should be just, that you should love one another, blah, 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 blah. But this man lived it. If you take a look at Matthew's account, you'll read, as we did, that there were wise men or magi that came from the east. If you look at Luke's account, the only other account of the Gospels, we've got 4 Gospels, but only 2 of them have birth narratives of Jesus. The other one, Luke, has no wise men. It has shepherds, but no wise men. I remember in that class with my professor Adolf Hansen, he said, wonder why that is, getting us to think about why that might be. Later, he explained his version of that. He says, they had different audiences. They had different purposes for who and they were talking to and what they wanted to get across. And he explained it in such a way that I still remember to this day, and this was decades later, is that Matthew wanted to associate Jesus with that which was royal and wise and noble, kingly. We 3 kings of me. He wanted to get a portrayal of Jesus as a ruler of the world, the Prince of Peace. Luke had a different intention. His was to associate Jesus with the lowly. To see that even we who feel so lowly sometimes have somebody that we can identify in Jesus. He was born in a lowly manger. If you look at Matthew's account, he was born in a house. But for Luke, he's born in a manger. With sheep and cows and such on. Actually, that's been added. It's not in the biblical account. That's been added by our traditions. But the point is that Jesus, for Matthew, he is somebody to be admired because he is wise, he is noble, he is a ruler. For Luke, he's the common Joe who rose to great heights, just like all of us can. Which story is more accurate? If somebody told me neither of them was accurate historically, it would not quench my faith one iota. Because I have learned what my professor said. Look at their assumptions. and look at your own assumptions and ask, what is the meaning of it? What is the purpose of it? How do these truths transcend culture and time? And when I look at that, I say, love was born into the world with Jesus. Love was born into this world, in a world of darkness, literally and figuratively. He was born, a little baby. If I were to ask you to create a story of love, you might begin with baby, would you not? Because what represents love more than a little child? It's interesting that the first gospel that spoke of Jesus being born was Matthew, which was written, depending on what your representation, but at least 50 years after Jesus' death, and probably 60. When you think back 50 or 60 years ago, someone like me, we're not even alive. It's hard for us 20-year-olds, isn't it? The fact is that even though it was thousands of years ago, whatever happened back then, however it happened, is less important to me than the meaning that carries across the ages. Love was born into this world in a special way. And maybe it gets born in a special way every time anyone has a child, or any time anybody is kind to one another, or gives a gift or a present or even a compliment. In this season of Christmas, we're told to be on our best behavior. Wouldn't it be great if we were on our best behavior all the days of the year? If every day was a little Christmas of love being born into this world? I look forward to creating some stories, some that are factually true and some that just make good stories. I hope that you'll do the same. And I ask you to think about what your story will be. I want to share with you one last thing. This story of Matthew was more than just a story about love being born into the world in the Jewish community of his day. He wanted to appeal to the Jewish community, and so actually some scholars have taken a look at Matthew's story and show that it really parallels the story of the Exodus. Now, whether that was put in to try to make it parallel, or whether it was what he thought happened, in any case, it made an impression on those Jewish people of that day. It made it more real, it made it more powerful. But the other thing that is created in that is that you've got people coming from the east, wise men coming from the east. Now the east was a place in that time which was very foreign. It was long, it was very far away. The Roman Empire was pretty much the world as people knew it in Israel at that time. And it extended beyond Israel, went down into Africa, went on to all of Europe, into Asia. But even further in Asia was this place where we knew that people lived, but they're very different like us, and they're not controlled by the Roman Empire. They're not oppressed by that Roman Empire. And even those people, this is what I think Matthew was trying to get at, even those people at the far ends of the world are coming to celebrate love being created in the world in this one called Jesus. What's that tell us? That the vision was of the whole world, not just a part of it, being in one with one another. That peace would be for all peoples everywhere, in every country, even those foreigners that we don't know so much about, even those who are not controlled by the dictates of the emperor of Rome. Is that not the peace that we seek in our world today? That all countries, whether they be in Asia, like Iraq or Afghanistan, or China, wherever they may be, that someday, and hopefully sooner than later, that there will be peace in this world for all of us, not just we Americans, but for every person. Is that not your dream? It is my dream. regardless of anything that makes them different. That is how I want to see love born into this world. Lastly, I saw a little bit of that myself just recently. I carry a lot of cultural assumptions as a U.S. person. I have seen many nativity scenes. I've seen many Christmas pageants put on, and I think a lot of them are really good. I recently went to a different country and saw one that I thought was even better. At first, I thought, I'm not sure I'm going to like this because this looks really different from what I'm used to. But I decided to open up my heart and my spirit to say, let's just experience for what it is and try to experience as the people in this culture. I was in Mexico at the time. And they had a Christmas pageant. It was more colorful and festive than I've ever seen any Christmas pageant ever by far. There was costumes galore. There was probably about 100 people who were celebrating this, and different actors, and they'd come out and they'd go out for 5 minutes and come back in, while somebody else replaced them. Sometimes there would be like 60, 70 people on the stage at one time, and they were dancing and they were singing, and I've never seen so much dancing in a Christmas pageant in all my life. And it was fun. It was a blast. I have to say, I've found deep meaning in Christmas pageants throughout my life. I've enjoyed our United States way of doing it. But it was so refreshing to go someplace else and see them do it completely differently. There were those little elements of wise men and shepherds. There were elements brought in of the things that, I recognize that now. But when they came out with sombreros and were dancing, that wasn't quite so familiar, but it was still fun. And I thought about what my professor told me. We've all got our cultural assumptions, and sometimes you got to go somewhere else in order to see how your own assumptions are so ingrained in you that you don't even know to ask the other questions of how you think about things. I was really thankful for that experience in Mexico. One, it gave a nice illustration for me to tell you today. But the second is it really gave me a sense of what it means to celebrate Christmas in a different place, in a different way. And I recognize there's a lot of meaning and truth in that story of Christmas in Mexico, even as in the United States of America. My prayer is that love will fill your life up so that you'll want to tell your stories of love wherever you go, to whoever you meet. God bless us as we tell our stories of love, born in our bodies and in this world we call home. God bless you. Merry Christmas.